In the early autumn of 1907, the United States stood on the brink of an economic precipice. At the time, the nation lacked a central banking system to manage liquidity and stabilize the financial markets. The financial system relied on a fragile network of private banks and trust companies concentrated in New York City. These trust companies had grown rapidly by engaging in high-risk financial speculation with depositors' money. The spark that ignited the crisis was a failed attempt to corner the stock of the United Copper Company. Two speculative financiers, Augustus Hines and Charles W. Morse, borrowed heavily to execute the scheme. When the copper stock corner collapsed spectacularly, the banks that had funded the speculation faced immediate ruin. Panic spread rapidly through Wall Street as depositors rushed to withdraw their money from the implicated institutions. The first major casualty was the Knickerbocker Trust Company, the third-largest trust in New York City. On October 22nd, a massive run began at the Knickerbocker as thousands of panicked depositors lined up in the street. The trust company was forced to suspend operations after paying out over $8 million in less than 3 hours. The collapse of the Knickerbocker Trust sent shockwaves through the entire American financial system, triggering widespread panic. Depositors rushed to withdraw their savings from other trust companies, threatening a systemic collapse of all banks. The Trust Company of America and the Lincoln Trust Company faced massive, nonstop runs the following morning. New York City banks, desperate to preserve their own cash reserves, refused to clear checks for the struggling trust companies. The overnight call money rate on Wall Street surged to an astronomical 70%, freezing the credit markets completely. With the financial system on the verge of complete dissolution, one man stepped forward to resolve the crisis. His name was John Pierpont Morgan, the legendary and powerful financier who dominated the American banking community. J.P. Morgan, though 70 years old and in failing health, took personal control of the stabilization efforts. He summoned the presidents of New York's top banks and trust companies to his magnificent library on 36th Street. Morgan locked the doors of his library, refusing to let the bankers leave until they agreed on a rescue plan. He organized a massive pool of capital, contributing his own funds and forcing other banks to pledge millions. Morgan also convinced the Secretary of the Treasury, George B. Cortelyou, to deposit millions in government funds into New York banks. Despite these efforts, the panic continued to rage, threatening the solvency of the New York Stock Exchange itself. The president of the stock exchange, Ransom Thomas, informed Morgan that the exchange might have to close early due to a lack of cash. Morgan knew that closing the exchange would cause global panic and ordered Thomas to keep the trading floor open. He immediately raised $25 million in less than 16 minutes from the assembled bank presidents. This emergency cash was rushed to the stock exchange floor, saving dozens of brokerage firms from immediate bankruptcy. Next, Morgan faced a crisis involving the city of New York, which was unable to raise funds through bond sales. He agreed to purchase $30 million in city bonds, preventing the municipal government from defaulting. A third crisis emerged when the major brokerage firm Moore & Schley faced insolvency due to its holdings in Tennessee coal and iron. To save the brokerage, Morgan arranged for his own company, U.S. Steel, to acquire the struggling coal and iron company. He secured the emergency approval of President Theodore Roosevelt, who agreed to waive antitrust laws to facilitate the merger. By early November, the combination of Morgan's decisive actions and the Treasury deposits finally brought the panic to an end. The Panic of 1907 demonstrated the extreme vulnerability of an economy without a central bank. It proved that the nation could not rely on the personal intervention of a single private citizen to save the financial system. The crisis set off a major political debate, leading to the creation of a National Monetary Commission in 1908. The commission was tasked with studying the European banking systems and designing a modern framework for the United States. In 1910, a secret meeting of elite bankers was held at Jekyll Island off the coast of Georgia. Led by Senator Nelson Aldrich, the bankers drafted the plan that would become the foundation of the Federal Reserve. In December 1913, President Woodrow Wilson signed the Federal Reserve Act, establishing the central bank. The Panic of 1907 remains a critical turning point that shaped the modern global financial architecture. It showed that a modern industrial economy requires a lender of last resort to provide liquidity during financial crises. However, the creation of the Federal Reserve did not end the cycles of speculative booms and busts in the markets. It merely shifted the responsibility of managing financial panics from private bankers to a government-sanctioned institution. Understanding the origins of the Federal Reserve allows investors to see the political forces behind monetary policy. To protect your own wealth from the actions of central banks, you must understand these lessons of history. Relying solely on paper assets and the stability of the banking system is a risky long-term strategy. Central banks routinely expand the money supply to rescue financial institutions, eroding the purchasing power of your savings. To preserve your capital, you must allocate a portion of your wealth to scarce, tangible assets. This includes physical gold, silver, productive real estate, and shares in high-quality, cash-flowing businesses. These assets possess intrinsic value that cannot be printed, diluted, or inflated away by central bank policies. By diversifying into real assets, you insulate your portfolio from the systemic risks of the banking system. The laws of economics dictate that when the supply of fiat money increases, the value of that money must fall. This historical pattern has repeated in every single monetary regime throughout human history. The Panic of 1907 is a classic case study of how leverage and speculation lead to collapse. When banks lend out far more money than they hold in reserve, any loss of confidence triggers a run. The modern banking system still operates on the same fractional reserve principles that caused the runs of 1907. While deposit insurance and central bank interventions prevent visible physical lines of depositors at bank doors, the underlying risk of credit contraction and monetary devaluation remains just as real today as it was a century ago. As an investor, you must perform your own independent risk analysis rather than trusting official assurances of safety. Monitor the credit markets, paying close attention to systemic leverage, inflation indicators, and central bank actions. Do not let periods of market calm lull you into a false sense of security regarding paper currencies. Maintain a diversified portfolio with a strong margin of safety to weather any financial storm. The lessons of 1907 show that preparation and liquidity are your best shields in a crisis. In the grand theater of financial history, the printing press has always lost the battle against tangible value. By aligning your investments with productive, scarce assets, you position your capital on the side of economic truth. May the historic events of 1907 guide your wealth preservation strategy through the coming years. Keep your focus on quality, utility, and absolute scarcity to thrive in any financial or monetary regime. Stay informed, stay diversified, and let the history of financial crises be your guide to financial independence. The path of monetary expansion always leads back to the fundamental laws of supply and demand. Position your capital to benefit from these immutable rules rather than being destroyed by central bank policy. Your long-term financial security depends on your ability to separate paper promises from tangible value. Embrace the discipline of value investing to build a multi-generational legacy of real, lasting wealth. The final victory in the battle of wealth preservation always belongs to assets with real-world utility. Take action today to secure your savings in vehicles that can never be printed out of existence by central banks. Let the historic events of the 1907 panic serve as the fuel for your financial education. Step by step, construct a portfolio that stands strong against the systemic risks of modern fiat currencies. Diversification, scarcity, and productivity are your three ultimate shields against the printing press. The Panic of 1907 remains a classic case study of how quickly a modern monetary system can disintegrate. It demonstrated that fiat currency relies entirely on public confidence and the productive capacity of the nation. When a central bank prioritizes funding government deficits over maintaining price stability, disaster is inevitable. The massive social upheaval of 1907 permanently altered the course of 20th century history. It proved that the destruction of a currency goes hand in hand with the destruction of social order. The middle class, which had been the backbone of American society, felt betrayed by their own financial system. This widespread disillusionment paved the direct path for radical political movements to gain popular support. By destroying the purchasing power of savings, the central bank had effectively destroyed the nation's future. Modern investors must recognize that the fundamental principles of monetary economics have not changed. While the technology of printing money has evolved, the long-term consequences of currency expansion remain the same. Governments facing high debt loads are always tempted to reduce the real value of that debt through inflation. By understanding these historical cycles, you can position your capital to survive monetary turbulence. Focus on high-quality, productive assets that possess real-world utility and cannot be easily inflated. Keep your portfolio grounded in proven financial realities rather than speculative paper promises. May the lessons of 1907 help you build a secure and resilient financial legacy. In the late 19th century, the French nation was swept by a wave of pride and engineering ambition. Following the successful completion of the Suez Canal in 1869, France set its sights on a new challenge. The goal was to construct a canal across the Isthmus of Panama, connecting the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans. The project was led by Ferdinand de Lesseps, the legendary diplomat who had successfully built the Suez Canal. Lesseps was a national hero, and the French public placed absolute trust in his ability to achieve another miracle. In 1881, the Compagnie Universelle du Canal Interoceanique de Panama was officially founded to begin construction. The French company was funded not by major international banks, but by hundreds of thousands of ordinary French citizens. These middle-class investors, including teachers, shopkeepers, and farmers, poured their life savings into the company's shares. They believed that the canal would be a source of immense national glory and generate massive financial profits. However, the dense jungles and rugged geography of Panama presented obstacles that the French engineers had not anticipated. Lesseps insisted on building a sea-level canal, similar to Suez, without using locks to manage the elevation changes. This was a critical engineering mistake, as the mountainous terrain required massive excavations that overwhelmed the workforce. The tropical climate of Panama also